If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I got a giant purple hoodie delivered to my house today. I wear black and gold for every single one of my sports teams. But unfortunately, everybody, my son's team, who I am coaching, we're the Rockies. So I got the Colorado Rockies hat. I needed a sweatshirt for the cold weather. My wife got me a Rockies shirt to match my son's team. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. It's a very weird thing for me. And this happens on opening day where the Pirates lose. Scott and I have some strong, some medium, some maybe cold takes, hot takes from this opening game. Scott, how you doing today, brother?
A little bit better than I was a couple of hours ago on my drive home as they were blowing the game. But when you started saying that you got a purple sweatshirt, I thought we were switching over to being a Mets podcast, and you were going full Grimace on me.
Well, and that's the funny thing is I told my son, I said, I'm Grimace. And he got the reference, which at least made me proud that he watched enough baseball last year that he knew what I was talking about. But yeah, I mean, dude, here's the thing is, in my son's baseball league, you could not be the Pirates. You could not be the Guardians. They're, licensed through Major League Baseball, and they only give you so many options. They put you in the randomizer. I'm not the Cardinals. I'm not the Reds. So, I mean, not that I'm happy to be the Rockies, but there were worse options.
That's something that's foreign to me from where I grew up, because I see that when they talk about all the major league players and they're like, oh, this person came to the Pirates when he was a kid. He was on the Pirates in his little league. Around here, it's just local companies that sponsor teams. Like when I was a kid, for like 3 years in a row, we were sponsored by the local Dairy Queen.
Yeah, and here's the thing is that was my son's, because I have an older son, that was their baseball league. I actually put that in their ear a few years ago because in my little league, I was the San Francisco Giants for 2 years, the Toronto Blue Jays before that. And for the longest time, everybody else was, in this little league was the Moon Tigers. And they were just all in different shades of red and gray and black. And I was just like, okay, we're sponsored by Little League. They actually have these things where you can, be a team and different stuff like that, just because it's supposed to grow the game. Like, not too many kids are, tuning on a game. Like my son, who actually watches basketball and football more than he watches baseball, said, do the Rockies come to town this year? So maybe, it may turn him onto the game a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you guys may get a couple pictures on X or Instagram or whatever it may be of me just in giant purple stuff. But I mean, we are a Pirates podcast. We're going to talk a little bit of Pirates here. There were some last minute spring training roster decisions that happened. Some of them were a little bit surprising, kind of some of them were not. Didn't know that, Hunter Stratton was as close as he was to coming back. I mean, everybody called it a catastrophic knee injury. It was definitely a tough knee injury. I saw it firsthand. Didn't know what happened. It was in one of the games I was at this year. kind of crashed into the back wall. It was enough for him to, you know, if it was a question if he was going to start on the IL or not. No, he's healthy, just being, option back down, but, a guy that proved himself enough. Joshua Palacios, a guy that we talked about during the last episode, kind of sent off because we were thinking about it to ourselves. We didn't want to get rid of Palacios for DJ Stewart, but then also you have two other left-handed options like we discussed in Jack Sawinski, Ji-hwan Bae, and then Palacios, kind of off the roster. Didn't really perform as we said. But I mean, good news for Hunter Stratton to work his way back and be a non-roster invitee who continually finds himself, on the 40 man.
Yeah, that's encouraging. That was a scary injury. You never like to see anything like that, but a testament to him for working hard and betting on himself, and the Pirates giving him the opportunity to come in and show that he's worth keeping around.
Yeah, and that's like a very cool thing. But the big thing and the big news here is, I mean, we're kind of bearing the lead, is that, we had been talking about the first base position for at least 4 or 5 episodes in a row. And we talked about, okay, do we still have to talk about this, first base position? We don't know what they're going to do with it. And then, Derek Shelton towards the end basically was like, okay, well, Endy's making the roster. He's also going to play first base. I wasn't sure if he was going to start opening day and if that was just going to be like kind of a fill-in position. I know people talk about like the different platoons. Sandy Alcantara is starting today, so a left-hander would make the most sense. You went from basically not having a first baseman in the discussion to, Endy starting at first base. I have no problem with Endy at first base. We talked about this, before we jumped on here. He's a guy who's been playing catcher and first base since he was like 18, 19 years old. So, I mean, it's not a foreign position to him. In the major leagues, a little bit different. But, I mean, if you're looking at the Pirates lineup and saying we need to inject some offense into it, Joey Bart should provide some of that. I mean, I don't have a problem with this move. It was just extremely, extremely surprising, especially since nobody reported this like throughout spring training whatsoever.
And that's kind of on us for taking the front office's word when they said, nope, he's just a catcher. He's only a catcher, and apparently he must have been working, on the backfields at first base. But then, despite deny, then he makes the roster. Oh, yeah, he's going to see time at first base. So, like I said, that's on us for believing what they were saying when we were trying to formulate exactly what they were going to do for first base. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see him get the start today. He had a strong spring, didn't have a great day today, 3 Ks, 2 looking. The backwards K was really a bit of a plague for the team today, but hopefully it's the first. It's 1 out of 162, and I know I messaged you and I said that I felt a certain kind of way about the game today, and it was like and we'll get to it, but you feel like a continuation of the end of last year a little bit. But as far as Endy goes, it's nice to see him back in a major league game. It's to see that energy, to see a fresh face, and I feel a little bit better because we didn't want any of the journeymen to get that spot and take a 40-man spot away from somebody who can contribute over the next few years. So yeah, I mean, playing Endy there, especially if his back can continue what he was doing in the spring and play him at first base and get through to when Horowitz comes back and allow him to get some reps there, some reps behind the plate, that kind of bridges that gap like we've been talking about.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is like, I mean, you have Endy, you have Henry, and you want those guys to get plate appearances. If you have Endy strictly as the backup catcher, where are those other plate appearances going to come from? I mean, obviously, there were some missteps. And that's the big thing for me was you have Paul Skeens, and I noticed at least like during the one inning, Paul Skeens likes to throw over to first base, and that may be the one part of the game that you kind of have to practice a little bit more. I mean, the footwork at first base, where the cutoff is from, different stuff like that, can kind of be worked on in the backfields. But yeah, Paul likes to work his way over to first base. He likes to get those kind of pickoffs. There was one that Endy picked that was kind of crazy, but yeah, you could see that he was a little bit nervous at times over there. Is kind of what I saw. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like we talked about last week, the possibility of like a Triolo and a Frazier filling in, different stuff like that. Didn't want to see a roster spot. No offense to DJ Stewart, but like kind of wasted on him. It's good to see them fill in that way when Horwitz comes back. I don't know, kind of what will happen to Endy, in that realm. But, for the first game, it's good to see him out there. Good to see, him getting those plate appearances. Obviously, for the Pirates, a very tough matchup against, a guy that was returning from Tommy John, but is a, former Cy Young. And some of his pitches just, move. I think somebody posted, are we watching a wiffle ball game just because of the way that he could make the ball move and different stuff like that. But just some, interesting roster decisions. The other thing is, them, having a bullpen that has 4 lefties in it. We've had the discussion before at the beginning of the season. You only have Joey Wentz. Now you have 4 lefties in that bullpen. Ryan Baraki, if he can spin it the way he did a couple of years ago, becomes a very valuable member of that bullpen. Obviously, the bullpen struggled a lot today, and it was guys that we were counting on. I mean, it was, Dennis Santana. It was Colin Holderman. It was Ryan Baraki for his first, I believe, 3 pitches, not being able to find the zone, and obviously David Bednar. I do believe there is that depth. A lot of people question, is there not that backup shutdown man? Aroldis Chapman had a decent season last year, had some struggles as well. I think a lot of the feeling about this came from his name, not from his performance, just to my, estimation. But yeah, I mean, it is frustrating to see that happen because, I mean, I was talking to you, Scott, and I was like, you get that feeling in your head that you're in like the 6th, 7th inning, you have that lead, and you start to chalk that, that win up in that one direction, or you chalk this game up into, okay, this should be a win. And then you sit there and, kind of watch it fade away. That is, just a frustration. I mean, that's what it is. Ono Cruz possibly misplaying a ball a little bit. If he makes the catch, in my eyes, I looked on StatCast, it was expected batting average of like 390, which is not super high, but it doesn't mean that it's like, a completely catchable ball where it's like estimated, batting average of, 10 or 20 or 30. So, I mean, that's a frustrating part. I mean, my thing would be is that, David Bednar gave up hard contact. That to me is, the more, I don't know, frustrating part, or just the eye-opening part of that. Hopefully that does not continue. That happened in the spring training as well. But yeah, there are some, first game frustrations that Pirates fans are feeling.
Yeah, Oneil Cruz did not have the best game in the field. That was tough in the 8th inning with Holderman coming in, and I think I've been preaching it all off season that I don't think Holderman has what it takes for that high leverage 8th, 9th inning. I've been saying no later than the 7th inning, but to his credit, he should have been out of that inning if we had the automatic ball strike system. He likely would have been out of that inning with the strikeout. But then, one of my biggest pet peeves in baseball? Throwing to the wrong base. O'Neill Cruz, making an ill-advised throw to home, allowing the runner to go to second, who then comes around to score on a single. Those are those little things that the Pirates have been talking about in the offseason that they need to correct. But they are fixable things. Things like bullpen management and deployment of your bullpen. That's fixable game to game. Learning the basics of where to throw and when. We're hitting your cutoff man, letting the cutoff man make the decision about where it's going to go. You know, just those little things that add up throughout the course of a 9 inning game. But like you said, with that, yeah, I don't expect him to make that catch necessarily, but be able to play the rebound, and you don't have Reynolds coming over into center field to pick the ball up. That kind of stuff. Knowing when to fold them, essentially. Um, and so being able to play the ball off the bounce and limit the damage, because then, hey, if you hold the runner at second, yeah, pretty good chance he probably still comes around to score with no outs, but it's still, you give yourself a better chance, and it changes the dynamic of the game. Those are coachable moments. It's 1 out of 162, and hey, it's starting a few years ago, starting super hot, historic start didn't work out for us. So maybe if we get some bumps in the road out of the way early, maybe that makes for a better season.
Yeah, losing to a bunch of no names from the Marlins. Like that's the crazy part is I mean, here's the thing, I'm a big baseball fan. I follow all of baseball and I honestly knew maybe three of the guys
And one
on
was
those.
because of his dad, Jeff
Yeah,
Conan's
and
kid.
one of them because of his dad. I mean, that's the crazy part to me. But yeah, I mean, it was a frustrating game. That the crazy part to me was um, Nick Gonzalez. I have to bring this up. I mean, we're going to have to talk about this. Is that he kind of hits the home run, which is like something we're waiting for. I'm like, okay, Nikki G has it because we watched Sandy make him look silly on a bunch of changeups, different stuff like that.
Hmm.
We know that is in him. He hits it. He gets about halfway to first base and just kind of starts limping. And I look at my son, my youngest, and I'm like, why is Nick Gonzalez limping? All this kind of stuff comes out later. It's what is described. I mean, a lot of stuff is like the reoccurring ankle injury. I mean, there may have been something that happened in this game that makes that happen, but like when you call reoccurring ankle injury day to day, like this is something that I'm guessing he's been dealing with throughout the camp. Obviously, didn't see it, during his time in the field, whatever he was doing during his early at bats, but it's obviously something that's been bothering him. And my biggest frustration that I brought out to you is how in the world did nobody know about this? If this is like an injury that seems to be something that didn't come up today,
Hmm.
that was occurring previously, and nobody was reporting on it, like, how does that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it got missed. Maybe they just did. Maybe do they have a policy of, we're not going to bring up injuries unless you guys ask about them. Um, I don't know, but like for the Nikki G thing, I think this is. I take notes sometimes, and especially today. This is the stream of consciousness that I have for the Nick Gonzalez. Nikki G and a couple of exclamation points. 2-run homer. Hurt? Question mark. Serious? Question mark. RBI machine. Recurrent ankle discomfort? Question mark. Question mark. Question mark. So yeah, where is this coming from? They're like, oh yeah, it's just that ankle injury he's been dealing with. It flared up on him. What? They know as well as anybody that they haven't told us about that. That we don't know about that. So day to day is encouraging. He seemed to be frustrated by it, and who wouldn't be? I think a big frustration for today's game also is that they knocked Sandy out as early as they did, and then you think that this is going to be a cakewalk against the Marlins bullpen, and it really wasn't. Ended up, bullpen versus bullpen, and they got the upper hand, and they got a memorable opening day, and we got some heartbreak.
I'm glad we got to get an insight into Scott's stream of consciousness that actually made me
Right.
smile. Uh, Not in a good way or a bad way, just in a way of like, I feel like my brain was thinking kind of the same thing as I was reading the Twitter stuff, as I was like kind of looking as like reoccurrent, like what? Like was this never even talked about? Like because here's the thing is like I know that people that listen to this listen to other sports as well. Um, Even if there's not a question, whatever, like especially in the NFL, NHL. I mean, NHL is a little bit weirder because they'll say lower body injury,
Right.
upper body injury. So like that type of stuff comes out. But in the NFL, like they have to almost like report every single thing.
Yeah.
It's like guy has a hangnail that may
Exactly.
impede his running, so like they have to report that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
just weird to me that like basically, I mean, like I read all of Todd Tomzik's like stuff that was saying like, this injury, this injury, this injury, but it was mostly the stuff that, was known to the fans or, that was reported. There wasn't a lot of stuff that occurred behind the scenes. I know at the beginning of the season, that Sean Sullivan, a pitcher that I was kind of interested in what he was doing, thought he would start his year in AAA. I think it was back in February. I think it was like the 19th or 20th. They basically said, well, we're going to send him over to minor league camp, but there was some like a little bit of like discomfort in throwing and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, spring training may be a little bit weird. It's just kind of crazy that like this never showed up as something that we would know about.
Hmm.
um but I mean, like, this is the first game, this is the first day, you know hopefully that doesn't equate to having a guy that we're kind of counting on, because there's a list of guys that we're looking forward to taking a step forward.
It's
Nick Gonzalez,
Yeah,
Winsky.
I
So
I agree with that, and we're really counting on his RBIs. And I can hear in my head, I can see it too, of Shelty in a like a post game presser being like, "Oh, it's just something that he's been dealing. He's working through it. Just tweaked it a little bit in spring, and he's just trying to get through it, and it's going to flare it up on him. No big deal. Like the things they always say." But guys that we're counting on, as you bring up, Key Brian Hayes with a very strong game, I thought today. A couple of steals, a couple of really good defensive plays that made that IKF to Hayes out at third base was huge. I thought that the play he made on the short hop right before the ball hit the bag and being able to get it over to first base, that was a huge play. Uh, at that point in the game, uh, a healthy Key Brian Hayes is a game changer for this team. And I think that that was a big part of the problem last year. We don't need him to be that MVP candidate that he was at the end of 23, but a healthy Key Brian Hayes that can drive in some runs, maybe occasionally hit some home runs, hit some line drives opposite field, and play that strong defense. Just keep him on the field as that good, very good, exceptional defender. That right there, solidifies quite a bit. And you allow Triolo to play his strong defense elsewhere too.
yeah, and that was one part of the Pirates game that people were kind of looking forward to and hoping that they could do. We talked about like not doing some of the little things, but yeah, being able to steal those bases. I mean, there was times where there was like kind of double steals without throws, which is not something I remember happening a ton during last season, which is basically meaning that they chose the right spot. The guys got good jumps, and that type of stuff was happening. So yeah, a healthy Brian Hayes, a guy that can stroke the ball but can also play good defense and steal. I mean, that would be instrumental to this type of stuff. And I mean, and we're focusing on one game.
Are you looking for coverage of all four major sports leagues? NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. Look no further than Sports Fivel. At Sportsvival, they are dedicated to providing quality sports analysis, up-to-date news, and original content with a focus on draft and prospects, analyzing how teams are built and how franchises evolve through their strategic decisions. Without sports, how would we survive? Sportsvival, proud partners of Bucks in the Basement.
I kind of want to look beyond this because obviously we did not do a season preview. Because, I mean, we talked to each other and basically said, what are we going to talk about? We've been talking about like season preview kind of this entire off season. So, that type of stuff, let's just react to the first game a little bit, see the last moves that are made. Obviously, there was some things that happened before, people even did, after the people did their season previews. So, I mean, for me, Scott, I feel like we're kind of the same people in a degree as we look at stuff a little bit, glass half full, a little bit. But, obvious frustrations about this first game. But, looking at the rest of the season, for the Pirates to be successful, what are some, I guess it would be key elements or just a few things that you're looking for if, the Pirates end up having a successful season? What are like one or two things that you'd be pointing towards as to why that would happen?
Fundamentals, the defense, cleaning up some of those little mistakes that they make, bobbles. I mean, you're going to have your physical errors. Balls are going to get dropped. You're going to make maybe get a bad hop, something like that. But it's the mental errors that they need to clean up. They need to know what base to throw to. They need to understand what the count is. Is this a running count? They need to make sure that they're smart on the bases. Those are the things that we almost, forget about when they happen. But they really, and you saw it today, that is a perfect example of why those things matter. Because the runner moved into scoring position on a mental error, and they ended up coming around to score to tie the game. And so that kind of stuff needs to be cleaned up. And we know it's not going to be a powerful team. They're not going to hit a ton of home runs. So they need to be able to, get on base, cut down on the strikeouts. That's going to be a big thing. I think that also what we saw today with a lot of caught lookings, I thought that with a new approach from what we heard in spring training was going to cut back on some of that and allow these guys to protect more, swing with two strikes. But even that, because even then, if the ball's close and you're swinging and you miss, hey, you were trying to protect. But just to stand there and watch strike three go right down the middle of the plate, and before the umpire even calls strike three, you're walking back to the dugout because you got beat. Those kind of things need to be cleaned up too.
Yeah, and the one thing I noticed was Tommy Pham, I think he threw the bat off his helmet at one point in time. And that's a weird part of all of this is like we're looking for a generalized approach. And you have like a veteran in Pham, you have a veteran in McCutchen, you have a veteran in IKF, who that type of stuff. I'm not saying if it doesn't work with them or affect them, like that it doesn't mean anything. But to me, if those guys are doing that, like, yeah, obviously in the short term that can kind of hurt the team. But I always look towards the long term as well, where, I know McCutchen signs here every year and, that could have a long term effect on it. But if it's not those guys, but I did look at like Cabrian looking at, a couple of pitches where it's just like he knows it's there. He knows he can pull the trigger on it. We did see, unfortunately, Nicky G, who maybe injured, like he is a guy who, pulls that trigger early, but not changing who the guys are in their approach, but as the count gets a little bit deeper, that you make that decision to just choke up a little bit and foul some pitches off. And I mean, that's what we saw, a very inexperienced Miami Marlins team do against Paul Skeens is, you know, they knew they probably were not going to get a hit on a certain pitch, but they would foul it off to get deeper in counts, to get a better pitch, to do whatever it would be. So that may be a frustrating thing for Pirates fans. I mean, they will put out stuff as to what really frustrates them, but to me, like that was, a little bit more of a frustrating part. And we're going back into this game because, we're Pirates fans and we're, kind of looking at that. But I mean, Scott, we also didn't give, our, and I'm pretty sure you have it in your head. I mean, I know I have it in my head. I've had it in my head for probably about a couple weeks now is, I mean, everybody has to give their record projection. I mean, people would be asking what we're doing. I mean, honestly, not that it means much. If you're waiting for Craig Toth and Scott Jackson's, Pirates projections, I mean, maybe find something else to do with your lives, like learn a hobby. No, I'm just joking. Like, please listen to us and, that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we have to give them because, I mean, I've given one every year for at least the past 5 or 6 seasons. So, I mean, Scott, what are you thinking, man? I mean, tough loss, but I mean, 161 more games to go. What are you thinking about for the Pirates season at the end? What does this look like?
Well, with the reinforcements that are coming, I and I put my number together before the game today, so I may be second guessing it now after seeing today's game. But I really do think that the depth they've created in the bullpen, the pitching that they have, the reinforcements that are coming, um, I think that, and even with the lack of offense that we'll probably see, I think the pitching can outweigh that. I do anticipate them taking quite the step forward because, like we've said all off season, if you can button down some of those games that you let slip, and today was one of those that felt like last year's kind of games. But if you can really use that depth of the bullpen to close out games that you should win, um, I don't see why, it is quite the jump, but 83 wins could be something that they, and maybe just out of the periphery of the wild card. But I mean, I'll let you give your number, and then I also put together how I think the Central's going to shake out. But yeah, I'd be interested in hearing your number.
No, I'm interested in listening to you, what happens with the Central because there have been some teams that make some, fairly large moves. I mean, obviously the Cubs are names on, the tops of a lot of people's lists, different stuff like that. For me, like it may be disappointing to people with the roster they had put together. And I feel like in 2023, they overachieved. I feel like last year they maybe underachieved a little bit. I have myself sitting, and it's been in my head for at least the past 2 weeks. I've been sitting at 80, and I know that probably isn't enough. Um, I hope I'm undershooting the team. Like, I see people, having anywhere from 72 to I've seen 86, 89 at times. I think 89 might be a little bit high. Usually I try to be like, I think I'm that's where I talked about before. I think I am that glass half full kind of guy, but maybe I am a little bit more of that glass half empty kind of guy. Um, I just kind of saw them as, a similar team that could take steps forward. I mean, there was games last year where they probably should have won with Bednar. different things like that that should have happened. I mean, the year before that, they went on a streak in August and September with 2 to 3 starters with Miguel Andujar coming. You had Jared Triolo hitting the crap out of the ball, different stuff, and you ended up performing fairly well. I don't know. Like, I wish that number was higher. I was thinking, like, in my mind, like, okay, I started this podcast in 2019, and I thought this year I would be aiming for like 88 to 90 wins, different stuff like that. But I just got to be honest and like true to it. I'm just like, I mean, I feel like this is possibly a team that could win 85 games, but I feel like it's a team that could also win 72 games. I mean, it's just where I sit at, Scott. I'm just trying to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And it's something that I've talked about a lot is the how the seasons end. And you're right. I think that's a great way to put it. Of overachieving one year, underachieving the next, because we talk about how the one season they're on the upswing and it gives you lots of hope in the off season, and the that off season versus the off season we just came off of, the sentiments are completely different, even though the record was the same. So yeah, I think that underachieving last year maybe makes my number, really take it into account. If they would have won, even 4 of the games that they had late, including a historic loss, that complete implosion, then that puts the improvement to get to my number, by 3 games. So, that's not an unreasonable number, but we have to see what happens with Jared Jones. That's something we didn't talk about yet. About according to the reports, there's no structural damage to his UCL. It's just a sprain, and so 6 weeks of no throwing, and then we'll kind of go from there. And so we get him bouncing back. Maybe steal some of these games early in the season that maybe you're not expecting to win, and then you put your best foot forward for the end of the season, give a push, and you've got guys with fresh arms and guys coming up from AAA that can maybe carry you through the end of that season, and you get hot. And again, I'm going to say it. I know that Carmen Majinski has been penciled in to be that 5th starter for whatever it's worth, but I really think that his presence in the bullpen, he could have been the stopper today. He could have been the fireman that comes in and puts out that fire and saves the day. I think that honestly, no matter what he ends up doing in the rotation, I think that he is more valuable to this team in the back end of the bullpen.
Yeah, and that's where I was, and that's where what I said last week was, not that I was like, hammering for Thomas Harrington to come in there and be the 5th starter. I just kind of looked at Majinski's numbers in the bullpen, and he was becoming a force within that bullpen. But then I also kind of looked at it as the fact of, people who we, characterize as misjudging, Oviedo's return. And, Carmen Majinski could follow that same path where he is the guy who starts out in the rotation, ends up in the bullpen, hopefully, being pushed out by either Harrington or Bubba Chandler coming up, and forcing him into that role. So when those games, I mean, every game counts, equally, but I mean, I also just kind of look back to, the Detroit Tigers last year. And I mean, obviously everybody knows it's the team I kind of follow to a degree, is that they were, pretty much out of it at the All-Star break, and then, flushed a bunch of youth, a bunch of energy into that, and ended up making, the playoffs. And, maybe the Pirates could be that type of stuff. But once again, we're talking about threading the needle. We're talking about finding that. It's, I don't know. I'm not going to get all depressing on this, but yeah, I mean, I did think we would be, further along, at this point in the in the rebuild. But I mean, this is kind of where we're at, and we'll see where it goes from here. I mean, there obviously are some worst case scenarios to this, but for right now, I mean, you kind of have to watch these games play out, see where you are month to month. If you are finding yourself, hovering around 500, then you may be in that. Because obviously, I mean, you're going to go around baseball, I mean, as baseball fans, and see teams get walked off. You're going to see teams that you're expecting to do well. I mean, the Cubs, having to travel to Tokyo and play the Dodgers and get, losing 2 games there and see what happens. So, I mean, for the Pirates, this is one game. We're looking for improvement for this team. Obviously, looking for improvement from the bullpen. But yeah, I mean, it's 162, man.
Yeah.
162.
And like you said, it happens to all the teams. My brother, he just recently moved to Cincinnati, and so he was at opening day for Cincinnati today, and the Giants came back in the ninth and ended up beating them. So it happens to every team. Just to finish the thought on the Central, just to get it out on.
Oh yeah, I want to hear that, man. I did want to hear that. Yeah.
Just want to put it on record, I guess we'll say. I think the Cubs have done enough in the offseason that they'll win it. I think the Brewers are still going to hang strong despite some losses that they had, namely like Willy Adames, and then Devin Williams, and see how things shake out there. I think the Pirates have a shot at finishing third, and just kind of depends on what other teams in the National League do, whether that puts them in that second wild card spot, or maybe just outside of it, which I think is probably more likely, just outside of it. And Terry Francona is fantastic for the Reds, but that's a big move for them, and I think he can get the best out of his players. But sophomore slumps, young players, not taking that step forward. We've seen it happen in Pittsburgh time and time again. I think it can happen in Cincinnati, and maybe that's just me wishing it, trying to manifest that in Cincinnati. And I think that this is probably the last shot we have for the Cardinals before they start coming back up. I think this is their last season of retooling and shipping off some of their players. Maybe Arenado plays well enough that he can get shipped off, despite them trying all off season. So I think they finish in the basement. That's my throw that out into the universe and see if I can make that happen.
And that's the reason why I hate the St. Louis Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, they were not even trying, it seemed like. And they still end up over 500. Like, I hate them. I hate the Cardinals. Everybody hates the Reds. I hate the Cardinals.
There's so many reasons to hate the Cardinals. For those reasons, they always seem to pull it out when you least expect it. And then there's just an arrogance, the Cardinal way, the best fans in baseball, this idea that they're some kind of low end of the middle market. They're not. They spend money. They go and get an Arenado and a Goldschmidt, and they sign those guys to contracts. And, they're not scraping by like the Pirates and the Reds and other teams like that. Everybody just has bought into the Cardinal BS, and it's worked for them. And hey, I guess you can't. They made the playoffs how many years in a row? How many decades in a row almost? But yeah, I'm just sick of it.
Yeah, F the Cardinals, and I love my brother-in-law Josh. He's a Cardinals fan, so F you, Josh.